All right. Welcome, Saints Nation. We have a little bit of extra fun this week. So, if anyone hasn't picked it up from previous content, I'm a member of the Saints Block Party Podcast Discord. We have a shit ton of fun in there. Y'all should join us if you're not in already. So, we decided to have a little fun this week. Have a member of the Discord join me today. We're going to go through offense. So, this is Bijon, and I'm going to add in a little chart here because I'm a super professional podcaster. And what we're going to go ahead and do here is we're actually going to talk about the Saints roster and we're going to grade everybody out. So, really quick, we already did a video on quarterback, so we're not going to cover these guys today. The grades are pretty high level. This stands for get the fuck out of my face. This will be reserved for players that under no circumstance do we want to see on the roster in 2025. So we're going to have some fun. We're going to work our way down, go through all of these. Hope you guys enjoy it. And yeah, it'll be a little bit of back and forth. So we're just going to go ahead and start with the offensive line. So we'll grade everybody, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit more in depth of what we think about the player. Bijon, what grade should we give Talius Fuaga?
I mean, this guy's a home run, right? So, I mean, he was one of the better rookies, that's been drafted. So probably the highest grade. So I think we have good player in there. But yeah, good player. He had some ups and downs, but he's a rookie and so many injuries on the line. But he played all of them and he played through injury, which is crazy. And I think Duke Manyweather likes him, which is always a great stamp of approval right there.
No question. Fully agree on that. And the only thing I'd add to it is and we'll get into this a little bit more over the next few minutes, he might have played next to the worst position group on the O-line.
Mm-hmm.
And O-line, the way I've always seen it described, O-line is probably the position about football I know the least. It is a unit more than any other position group.
Yep.
You can have a great individual player, but they really are a unit just with protections and the way you handle things and the way plays are called and protected. And to have the year he had with what was to the right of him,
yeah,
and at times what was behind him,
yeah,
pretty damn impressive.
Yeah.
Next guy on the list, unrestricted free agent, Shane Lemieux. How you want to grade him?
What do you think? I mean, because of what you said, yeah, I think because of what you said about O-line and it just being a unit and it being such a rotating thing, I have a hard time giving anybody get the fuck out of my face ranking. But I felt like he was decent. He played a few positions along the line. I feel like, most games he played, I didn't really hear his name, which is the best you could ask for from an O-lineman. And he's already kind of, just a guy. And then you're coming into playing next to other people who are just guys. So I think exists feels fair, for that one.
I think exists is fair too. Yeah. I don't have any animosity for him. He wasn't a stud, which is fine. He's your third or fourth string guy, depending on what positions he was at. But he will, relative to that expectation, certainly wasn't a insane liability either. Next guy on the list, probably the easiest evaluation of all of these, under contract for the next couple of years, Eric McCoy. I don't even think really needs a conversation.
No,
we saw it went out.
Yeah, we saw it without one of the 5-10 best centers in the league, just cornerstone guy. Yeah, I mean, he erases so much, even if you have just kind of dudes, random people next to him, and you saw what happened when we didn't have him. It became Derek Carr having to call protections, and so.
And that was really good.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah. So really quick, just for those watching, there is no great player designation on this. That's because we were a bad offense. So no one stood out enough to be a great player. Context does matter. In the event where there was a great player designation, Eric McCoy is one of the two guys on this list that might have gotten that. Fuaga barely doesn't get it simply because he's a rookie. Rookies have to be exceptional to get that. So here's Lucas Patrick. Lucas Patrick's next on our list, unrestricted free agent, 31 years old, left guard for most of the year. Where do you want to grade him? Because I think this might be our first disagreement.
So he's too old to be developmental, for sure. He's too old to be developmental. I think he played well enough to get out of the lowest tier. I think you can probably put him as a contributor, to be honest. Now, contributor can be a lot of things, right? That can be starter, that can be rotational guy, that could be. I do think he is a person that is good for depth. Like if we're relying on him, like, yeah, I mean, like that's a tough spot. That's probably more an indictment on the roster construction than him himself that he was so relied upon. But I'd probably go contributor on that one and just hope that he doesn't have to start. That's probably where I'm at.
So here's where I struggle on Lucas Patrick. If I'm going the entire breadth of the season, for me, he's a get out of my face guy.
Interesting. Wow.
Because there were a lot of games, like guard was our weakest position on the roster by far and away for the offense all year. But he had a lot of games where he was an absolute disaster.
Sure.
He also had some games early in the year where he was pretty damn good. And he did play through a lot of injuries, and it is difficult to know, especially with large humans. And he had some lower body injuries throughout the year. Once a guy is playing compromised, it's harder to grade him. So I'm fine with going to exists for him. Contributor, I don't think is there just because, to me, a contributor is someone where there's a non-zero positive contribution to the roster, and I don't think he's above replacement level. But sure. I think exists is fine as there.
Yeah, I'm fine with exists. I guess just with how bereft of O-line talent there is in the league, the fact that he was even able to show that he could be decent. For a while, him and Patrick, Lucas Patrick and Fuaga next to each other, that was just that's where we were running, right? And so that's where if a guy flashes in the context of being an O lineman, I feel like it's okay. I think best case scenario is he is James Hurst, just a person who can come in and do his job. Am I expecting him to hold up against the best interior O lineman defensive lines? No, obviously not. And I think it's probably no accident that his fall off probably happened. He was probably most affected when McCoy got hurt, is my guess. And this is where we can't grade people in isolation. But when you had McCoy, 100%. When you had Fuaga, Patrick, and McCoy, we thought Patrick was a revelation at that point when he had those guys next to him.
Before McCoy got hurt, before Patrick got dinged up.
Yeah, exactly. McCoy gets hurt, Patrick gets dinged up, and then Ruiz missed some time too. So then you have the entire O lineman. He probably learned Shane Lemieux's name 3 days before game day. So that's where I see the ceiling is probably contributor. I'm fine with exists, right? But I could see him very much being just a James Hurst person. If I had to plug him in for
James
5
Hurst
games.
2 years ago, not his last year here where he was
correct, not his last year.
In the NFL.
Yeah, when we randomly fell upon James Hurst and he played 3 positions and he was kind of solid at every single
one. For sure.
Yeah. But I'm fine with exists.
If he was 26, 27 instead of 31, I'd probably put him at contributor because there's a non-zero chance he provides value going into the roster next year. At 31 going into 32, having had some lower body injuries, he exists. He may be on an NFL roster, but I don't expect him to have a positive impact in 2025.
Sure. Or you'd hope that you're not relying on him to have that.
100%.
Yeah.
Speaking of hoping you don't have to rely on him, what may be the most controversial guy on the O-line, what are your thoughts on Trevor Penning's 2022?
It's a mixed bag. I think he was competent. Which I think is a long way from what he was, which was unplayable. There were some games where you just saw it, where it's he is clearing out the backside, he is pulling on screens, he is holding up in pass protection and all that. You saw it in some games. Then you saw some games where he is ballerina pirouetting, because the lineman put a move on it. It escapes me, but there was like one especially bad rep where he just kept getting beat over and over and over by like the same guy. So I think he was
Yeah, I think
competent.
it might have been in preseason.
It could have been
The
preseason.
Texans, I think.
Yeah, I think the Texans game possibly, and so I think he was competent, which I think is like okay. I think it was the Rams game. I think the Rams game he was just getting worked by everybody in the Rams game. But now in retrospect, Jared Verse is working everyone. So
so
Jared Verse was
it's a little bit
working
less
Lane
like,
Johnson.
oh, this guy is awful, and like, oh no, that guy's just really good.
Yeah, he got like the Rams game wasn't great. The Packers, like with Rashawn Gary and all of them, kind of like walked him down a bit. Like he had some pretty inexcusable reps against the Packers, where for 5 seconds, Rashawn Gary just walked him back. Like I don't care if he gets beat on a bend because like he's a bigger guy, but when Rashawn Gary just basically like forklifts him throws him, that shouldn't happen. But again, like O-line play is like hard to come by. So I think he is competent, and I probably go developmental with him. He's now 3 years into the league. This is probably his most cohesive year as far as like not being injured, not being passed to like every different position. He had one position that he trained for throughout the offseason with a fresh OC, no emotional baggage of like the previous offensive staff hating him. This was his first cohesive season. It sucks that it came in year 3, but he's only 25, and I see enough to where it's like developmental, where like if I go into next season and he's a starter, like I'm kind of okay with it, just given like where this roster is,
So to me, I fully agree with all that. So to me, he's a guy where you would love to get better at the position.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really fascinating about his year, and I'm very interested to see how he goes into next year. If we had done this after the second preseason game and training camp, he would have been a get out of my face guy.
Sure.
I actually am going to put him as a contributor, and here's why. One, to your point, O-line play around the league is extremely difficult to find. Two, the games he struggled the most this year were the games against premium pass rush.
Sure.
Typically, the players who can reliably perform well against premium players are premium players.
Yeah.
And we'll get into a couple of the other caveats as far as some of his performance. Like the Giants game, he was awful. The Giants game, the whole O-line was awful, and that was kind of inexcusable. Like they were terrible. There's also there's other people that were even more terrible. I mean, the quarterback decided that he believed he could fly, but he forgot flying requires landing, and hadn't mastered that skill yet. Like his jersey, his IQ and his character level are only 4, and
sure.
There was a lot that happened in that game. But I'm going to put him as a contributor because he was actually a very consistent, highly effective performer in one aspect of the game all year long, and that was the run game. And he was rarely, it happened, but rarely throughout the entire course of the season, a disaster as a pass blocker. So he's not a good player, but I think he's past developmental in that you have a full season sample size of him being at least able to contribute to an NFL roster. And that moves him out of the guys we got to get rid of category, but also past the maybe there's something there we're not sure, because we at least now know he's a good run blocker. And Streif was like that. Streif would get absolutely abused against certain types of pass rushers. But he was fantastic against the run. But you had a great quarterback and a great offense and other factors around it that allowed you to game plan. Because again, O-line is a unit. If you have one weak link, you can game plan around it. If you got 4, which at times we did, we saw what happened against the Broncos.
Sure.
And
I probably didn't realize that contributor was above developmental, which makes sense. So that's on me. But I think
all good.
Yeah, and I think the main thing with Penning that he has, and this isn't him, this is just like player to player, but like you see it, like you saw it with him, with like Andres Pete, when they fail so loudly. Like you see flailing, you
Yes.
see on the butt, and it doesn't any mean necessarily that they failed any harder than any of the other O linemen. It is
No,
just
it's
noticeable.
just
Like
loud.
yeah, like McCoy has had bad games, but you rarely like McCoy. Like he misses whatever. But like when Penning misses, like that's the only thing I see on the screen, and I think that doesn't help. And Streif was like that too, like where it's like everyone hated Zach Streif when everybody on that O line would lose, but it was loud when like we have the screen grabs of
100%.
Penning and Streif and Andres Pete like
Yep.
failing, you know. So that's
Other
I
than
think a little
Ramchek,
bit
it's
of it.
just been the fate of right tackles in New Orleans.
Yeah, man. Even Stinchcomb before that, like
Yeah, for sure. So Saldiveri, I don't know how we can put him anything other than developmental, simply
yeah, that's probably
because
where I'm at.
the time he was on the field, like he actually looked pretty good at times. But that time he was on the field qualifier is pretty important. Like it moves him close to get out of my face, but he's also like 22 years old and still has a couple of years left on his contract. And sometimes with O linemen, like it's you get one fully healthy season and then everything clicks and then they're good the rest of their career. That's not unprecedented. So like I think it's kind of an easy eval for us. I think it's a hard one for the Saints
Yeah.
coaches, but they're doing I mean, Dennis Allen probably this is what his evaluation would look like. Mickey hasn't even started his yet. But like the people who actually like are genuinely doing this are probably going a little bit more in depth than you and I are. God, I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah, I won't spend too much time on it, but I mean like it's just like overall incomplete, right? Because like he
Yeah.
never got playing time even last year. Like we don't know whether it was like he was so bad or like it was like I just find his whole tenure here is just weird. Like everything
And
is
it's
just
hard to guess
weird.
like in the Dennis Allen era as well because so many
Right.
things with DA were like just made no sense at all.
Yeah. So that's
As
where
we'll
like
cover with a few guys coming down here.
yeah. Yeah. So if there was like an incomplete grade, then like
Yeah,
that's probably what he gets. But yeah, like developmental's fine. So
sounds good to me. All right, next on the list, Cesar Ruiz, or also known as Seizure Ruiz. Where are you
yeah,
putting him? I know where I'm putting him. I want to hear where you're putting him.
I mean, another guy we kind of just know. I think we know who he is at this point. Um, it's probably again. I'm always going to harken back to like O line play and what it is in today's league, and you don't want to think it, but like he's a contributor to me. Like he can start. Like you could be a lot worse than him at right guard, and I think he's another guy like he was fine for a while. He was like pretty solid this year, and then just extended time playing next to backups. You eventually saw like him start to atrophy. So it's another guy like where like I think in a vacuum when he had McCoy and Penning next to him, like he was fine, but he's not like a guy who you could just. He's not like Fuaga, where like Fuaga we put him over there and like doesn't even really matter who's next to him.
Yeah.
He's like fine. Ruiz needs like
Fuaga and
good
McCoy are
players next
good
to him.
players in vacuums. Ruiz, you can hide.
You can hide, and even sometimes like he improved pulling this year. Like he's not falling as much, and I think like I said, just the back half of the season, like the O line's in tatters. Like I don't know who
Yeah.
looks good. So to me, he's a contributor.
So to me, he's actually a get out of my face guy, and I'll explain why.
Oh, interesting.
So part of it is his contract. So he's on his second contract. He's not a rookie. He's not a developmental player. He's not a guy where you're betting on his upside. He is below replacement level in a lot of areas as a guard. But my biggest issue with Ruiz is actually his strength or lack thereof. So you ever seen those
Sure.
adorable videos of like pandas at the zoo?
Yeah.
And they're just
yeah.
spectacularly uncoordinated creatures where you go, how did these things survive?
Yeah. No, for
We
sure.
talk about Penning's failings being loud, but I think there's a
Yep.
lot of confirmation bias with Penning because of coverage, because of DA benching him through the media, because of all of that, where
Yeah.
people are looking for his failures, and so they find them. Not saying the failures aren't there, but like as far as narrative, if you go and watch Ruiz play, you'll find a lot of atrocious snaps, and at least to me, he played significantly worse than Penning did consistently this year without the excuse of this isn't his first year full time starting. This isn't his first year playing this position. But the biggest part is if you're a guard and you're on the interior line, getting beat with speed is one thing.
Yeah.
When you get absolutely blown up, like you're playing Burnout Revenge, for those who know, that's a whole different level of problem. And especially when you're trying to be a run first team, he does not get push in the run game ever. Now, that said, he's a dancing bear. Now, he's a panda, but he's still a dancing bear. If you get Ruiz out in space, like if Ruiz is your only negative offensive lineman, A, you can protect him to your point, and B, you can have plays where you work to his strengths, where he pulls, where he gets out in space, where he gets downfield. There was the great clip against the Cowboys where he's all the way down the field in front of AK. Like, he has the ability to do those things, but because of his weaknesses, because the snap over snap, game over game problems of the things he doesn't do well, they're core requirements for the position, at least for me. And I'm biased against him, and I'll fully acknowledge that. It kind of reminds me of Traquan Smith. Here's what I mean by that. I had arguments with people for years about Traquan. Oh, he's an elite blocker. Okay, but what position does he play? Wide receiver. What's the second word? Receiver. What does he not do well? Receive. Like, yes, he's good at these secondary or tertiary aspects of his role, but if you're really bad at the primary components of the position, you're not a plus player. Sure. And most teams don't play 5 wide all the time with wide receivers. So wide receivers 4 and 5 can have weaknesses. But 1 and 2 need to be complete players or you have problems. And to me, the O-line is the same way. And that's a very long-winded Brian answer, but I would have him at get out of my face. I get the argument. Again, I'm biased. Our contributor, I'm going to split the difference and say at least he exists.
That's what I was going to say.
He's under contract through 27. Yeah. Left guard is something we can probably fix this offseason. This is a future Saints problem.
Yeah, for sure. And I imagine we'll probably go through, or I guess, do we just want to put Udo and Young as exists?
Udo's get out of my face.
Or Young exists probably.
Young exists for sure. Like these ones are easy eval for me. If Young wants to come back on like as a depth guy on a really cheap deal, I don't have a problem with it. I never want to see Udo snap up for the Saints again. He was horrifically awful.
Yeah,
the bit he played. Again, we're gonna skip quarterback. How did you feel about the Clyde era?
Just last note on O-line though, just as a holistic thing, I think talent is middling, I think, across it. I think the main thing the O-line suffers from is there's just no actual cohesion, and this is all kind of DA era type stuff. For sure. The best O-lines, the strengths and weaknesses all feed into one another from player to player to player to player. Fuaga's great. McCoy is great. Trevor's fine. Caesar has his flashes, but them four in O-lines together, just kind of, it's just 5 guys playing. And that's kind of the main thing. I don't want to compare everything to the Sean era, but you think about that O-line, we're going to build over 2 guards, and that the 2 guards are going to be so good that we can hide the center. And basically that is where it is. And then the tackles are going to be a little bit quicker, between Bushrod and, Streif or whatever, but that's where it was. You had pretty big roles where it's Penning is this road grading O-lineman who gets put next to Ruiz, who's this dancing bear O-lineman, who gets put next to McCoy, who's this hyper athlete, not exactly road grader, but just this hyper athlete, I need to be out in space O-lineman. And then Patrick and then Fuaga. It's just no cohesion. So I think that's just
stylistic synergy, to use my SAT
right,
words.
Exactly. So and Clint brought a little bit of it where he got him out in space, but it just wasn't enough. And then you put the injuries in there, no chance. So
for sure. No, I think all those are good points. And one last kind of holistic point on that as far as the O-line. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I kind of want to say it more directly. I think if you replace either Patrick or Ruiz with a at replacement or above replacement level player, and then you go back and you really look at O line, this again is a lot of that confirmation bias. There was so much narrative and so much conversation about the O line in training camp and even in preseason. And certain people who cover the team professionally, who may or may not talk out of cheeks not located between their shoulders at times, really set some unrealistic expectations in a negative way for the unit. If you really go back and look at the season, my opinion, especially if you watch around the league, the games where we had 3 starters out, unfortunately, those games also lined up with facing 2 of the best defenses in the NFL.
Yeah.
In the Denver Broncos, who led the league in sacks, and the Chargers, who were up there as both pressure and sacks. Yes, Mickey, pressures does not equal sacks. They are separate statistics. Just like interviews doesn't mean hiring a good coach. They're separate things. Imagine that.
Different podcast.
Different podcast. You already did a 30-minute video on that idiot, and I'll probably do another one because he drives me nuts. I do think like that part of it does need to be pointed out, is that we don't have a stellar offensive line, but if you have a good left tackle, if you get a solid guard, left or right, you have a workable right tackle, a great center, a great, good to great left tackle. That's actually an above average offensive line. But the component of the offensive line play that didn't get talked about enough this year is, one, we had 2 out of 3 quarterbacks who the moment they see pressure, their brain turns into a bag of Skittles. And then a rookie, but also the offensive scheme in general. They didn't have any semblance of how to handle pressure. Like games they did okay with, like, DT stunts, things like that, but just straight beat your guy. Against teams that could do that, they really didn't have an answer, and they didn't have hot routes and things that allow you to get offensive linemen positive snaps. You can build a rhythm, get out of your own head, go on to the next step. Like those types of things matter, and Clint didn't do that at all this year. So like being fair to the O-line, I do think that part mattered as well.
Sure.
But, overall, they are what they are. And we saw what they were. And speaking of a they are what they are unit, so Clyde, and again, I'm gonna start off by acknowledging bias, because I think that's fair to do. Not an LSU grad, not an LSU fan, and also because of that, one of the people who occasionally gets really annoyed with LSU Saints fans who just decide every player that played at LSU is like a future Hall of Famer. And there's a bunch that are. He's not one of them. He wasn't good enough to be a first-round pick, wasn't good in Kansas City. He didn't do shit while he was here. Now, he's not a get-out-of-my-face guy for me just because I have no issue with him. There is a get-out-of-my-face guy on this unit.
Oh, man.
We all know who that's going to be.
I think we have a few.
But to me, he exists. Like, he can cash an NFL paycheck. I don't think it needs to go any further than that.
Same. Yeah, so I think, do we maybe want to do the grades a little quickly, since we have like kind of a lot of Jags on here, and then we can maybe talk about it as a whole?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. I mean, easiest grade of them all.
Good player, best player on the team. Great guy.
Other than McCoy, the only other guy, if there was a great player moniker that would have a shot at that, is Alvin.
Yep. He's get the fuck out of my face for me. Kendre is.
I agree. Not only because he can't stay on the field, but he's dumb.
I'm just done with it, man.
And the one thing I can't, obviously as a fan, not a pro athlete, but the one thing I can't stand, if you're dumb and lazy, get the fuck out of my face.
Yeah. I'm done with it. Like, and then Jamal Williams out of my face.
For a multitude of reasons. First of all, you named yourself after like the lamest Kage, like Bijon, just on that alone. Also picking, I think he picked Kaze because he maybe knows it means wind and he thought that was fast, but then why wouldn't you choose Rye? But we're not going to go into all that. But like, double fuck this dude. Um, like he's just annoying. Like he doesn't seem like a bad guy, but he's just annoying and he's terrible and he's paid more than $0. Get the fuck out of my face.
Yeah, he's just a guy. And then I'll just say like real quick, like Mims, I think exists, did his job.
Yep.
Fine. Prentice is probably get the fuck out of my face too. I still
Agreed.
have that fumble from last year in my head.
Yes.
So like
First thing that popped into my head.
Like, but like, yeah, with Jamal Williams, like
Facts
I
are
won't.
not hard to find. There's one at Arizona State that I'm kidding, he's not a fullback. PJ's gonna shoot me.
Yeah, I won't rail too hard on Jamal Williams as far as the off the field stuff. Like, yes, he annoys the shit out of me too. But like, I think
good dude.
he's just like
get out.
He's also just the guy. Like, unfortunately, like when your team is bad, which our team is, regardless of what the front office wants to say, like we are a bad team. The person like who's overly positive is like the most annoying person when your team is bad. So like that kind of amplifies it when we're bad, and then he's like still posting like smiling swag
he's
pictures.
The offense's
like,
Cam,
but he's not good. Like, but without the clout, like
Cam
so
has 14 years of being a really good player for we accept him being barely a contributor, but really annoying on social media.
Right. And even Cam, it's just like one tweet on Monday, which is like we're going to move on and whatever. But like, yeah,
well,
that's
and
like
that
the main
depends
thing.
on how you feel about his NFT tweets.
Yeah. So Jamal Williams is just like every team has it. Like the captain that you never that nobody asked for. That's what Jamal Williams is.
Yes, 100% totally agree on all the running back guys. Obviously, AK is AK. Like that's the easiest eval in the unit. I agree on Kendre as well. I'll say this too as another reason why I have, even though he's only 22, and purely as a runner, Kendre is a very talented player. Mm-hmm. Here's the thing for me though. If you look at this upcoming draft, there are 15 to 20 guys legitimately who are better NFL prospects than Kendre was.
Yeah.
And they will have 2.5 years of nonstop injuries, bad habits, bad attitude, bad coaching, bad taste in your mouth, like all of that. And so if there was ever a time to go, yes, he's a young player. Now, maybe you can find someone that's willing to take him for a 5th round pick, which I would do. This is the year to do it when you have a draft that is absolutely loaded at that position and with guys with real juice, which is the only thing, especially at this point in his career, AK doesn't really bring, is he doesn't bring that home run element.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's where just like at this point, like with running backs, like, yeah, with Kendre, like, yes, talent's there or whatever, but like, I don't care if it's not on the field. And then he doesn't really give me anything else either. Like, he's not going to be a good pass protector. Like, he's an okay receiver. So, I mean, like, there's that. And then, culturally, like, I just think, like, you got to move on. And, like, I just prefer, like, I prefer Jordan Mims, who's, like, been in UDFA, who tries hard and kind of just goes there. Or just, like, like, even somebody, like, say, like, on the Broncos, like, Jaleel McLaughlin, like, who's just, like, kind of, like, a guy who works hard. Like, like you said, I watch basically most of these playoff teams. They have like a 3rd string guy that I would immediately take, whether it's like Jeremy McNichols for Washington, like Kenneth Gainwell on Philadelphia. Like, just give me those guys. Like, so I'm kind of done with it. But overall, like running back, we need guys. Like AK's at the point of his career. Like I love that he got all the volume and I love that he almost rushed for 1,000 yards, but I need this setup. However they figure it out, there are plenty of ways to skin a cat here, but like I need a setup to where AK is getting 10 to 15 touches again, 10 to 15, 20 at the high end. I don't want to see any more games with him getting 30 carries a game. Like, even though he's
red hot and just going nuts like he did against Carolina.
That's the thing. Like, it's not even so much the 30 carries a game. I just don't like the style of the 30 carries. Like, and that's the main thing. Like, when AK kind of has to be everybody, like he has to be our bruiser, he has to be our pass catcher, he has to be our outside zone guy, he has to be like everything. and I just want him to do the fun things now. Like I want somebody younger to do all the gross stuff. Like where is my Mike Bell? Where is my Chris Ivory? Where is my Kyrie Robinson? Give me like one of those like whatever guys. Like none of those guys had like huge juice, but like
Tuss did, but he just all he had was a straight line.
Yeah. And so I think just like the organization owes it to AK to let him, like, he's not sunsetting his career. Like I think he can play until his mid-30s, but like you have to manage him
100%.
Basically, like Cam Jordan's the cautionary tale.
Let AK be like Frank Gore was the later half of his career, where like still a very valuable contributor, still a very good player, but he became more the complimentary guy. And I'll say two names. One, because it's legitimately likely, or at least possible at 9, especially depending on who our head coach ends up being, which we'll find out sometime in the next 6 weeks. Fuck you, Mickey. Genty is certainly an option there.
Sure.
My personal, and it has been for 2 years, and I'm glad that Adam and some other people have come around on it now because I've been saying this guy's name for a while. Blue out of Texas is my like personal running back draft bay in this draft. And my hope is that Henderson gets all the, oh my God, instant touchdown guy hype, and Blue somehow makes it there to like the 3rd round and they grab him because I think he's a stud. But just personally, that would make me happy to get a guy like that.
Yeah, and the last point I'll make on it is like I just want them to do basically the opposite of what they did with Cam Jordan with Alvin Kamara, where like Cam Jordan, they should have been sunsetting at a certain point, whether it's kicking him inside, getting him help, like do more to where he doesn't have to do more. Like I hate to bring up the Eagles, but like I'm in Philadelphia, and the Eagles basically kind of have done a magnificent job with Brandon Graham, late career, and Fletcher Cox, who's now retired. Both of those guys like could just come in on your 3rd and longs and your splash plays, and they set it up that way. So I would like to see more planning around Kamara. And I don't think I'm not gonna like give draft takes up there, but like I prefer almost the approach like, you know, if it's Genty, it's Genty, like cool. But like I need that cupboard stocked. Like I need them to go into next season. I don't care if it's AK, draft pick, just a guy. Like I will take 2 more guys who are Clyde Edwards-Helaire-esque and go in like
maybe a little better than that.
Maybe a little better than Clyde, but like just like
he was like a Ruiz level 1st round pick.
Yeah, I just need, like I said, if you bring in a guy who just does pass protection, like so AK doesn't have to pick up linebacker blitzes.
Trade down to like 16 and get like Nolan out of Ole Miss and like another 1st or 2nd rounder. Like that's my dream scenario. But maybe we'll do this again, and we'll specifically talk the draft when we get closer to that.
Yeah.
But totally agree there. Speaking of home run hitters, another easy evaluation. Ooh. If you don't, and no one watching this is not a Saints fan, so I don't expect this. But seriously, if you don't think Taysom Hill is a good and impactful football player, shut up. Shut up. Stop talking sports. Get into Lincoln Logs or something that's more your intelligence level, because you're not ready for this. Taysom Hill is fantastic. He single-handedly won us 3 of the 5 games we won this year.
Yeah, I mean, just great.
Shut up.
Yeah, just great. I would almost put him in great player mode, like heart and soul of the offense. To be honest, like, he's that guy. We don't need to belabor
100%. Down Holger's developmental to me, like UDFA, got a little bit more time, showed a few flashes, especially towards the end of the year, like showed some flashes. Again, how much does he have is hard to know, partially because I just don't know if Clint is capable of developing a high-level pass game, and certainly not of adjusting within a game to what's working. It took him the entire season to realize that, like, once you lost one of Olave or Shaheed, the best group you had for moving the ball through the air was your trio of tight ends. But Holger to me is an easy eval. I think we're on the same page for Juwan.
Yeah. I mean, get him out of here, man. Like, and for me, like, you know, I mean, a lot of people have like a little personal vendetta, and I get it. Like, you know, he's very annoying on TikTok. And again, like, these are all traits when you're a bad team. Like, the last thing you want to see is like these TikTok things. So like, but I honestly like just he's an unrestricted free agent. I don't feel like putting any more years into him. I think he was a successful player, like here for where we got him, like, you know, undrafted free agent, started as a tight end, stayed, grinded, fine.
Yeah, converted wide receiver.
Yeah, very replaceable.
Go sign in Denver and be the heir apparent to Big Fish over there or something.
Yeah.
Go somewhere where you're the fourth option on a read and dropping where it's less impactful and you're less needed to be a main guy, so that you occasionally dropping a how the hell did he drop that play isn't as infuriating. Like, that's very much where I am with him. Get him out of my face. He drove me nuts. He also, like, and again, maybe a little bit of personal bias here, but like the last couple of seasons in particular, Juwan's got a little bit of Derek Carr in it. And what I mean by that is, you go look at his end of year numbers versus like games played and stuff. It's like, well, he's not that awful. It's like, okay, you didn't watch the games.
Sure.
Almost all of Juwan's numbers came those last few weeks when nothing mattered, and also you were playing pretty bad teams. And even then, he was dropping like really easy passes and messing stuff up. And it's like, it's kind of like that Derek Carr thing, like, which again I did in that video and we won't go through here now, but like, oh, well, his EPA is high. Okay, cool. That's your argument. I now know I'm talking with either a dumbass or a gambler. Like, I thought we were talking football. My bad. And I kind of am there with Juwan of, there's just way too many games where he's too unreliable and just does flat out nothing. So get him out of my face. Foster's
I think I was just gonna say, like, with Bijon, like, I think so. Him and Carl Granderson are about the same age. They're both 28. I think they came in the league at the same time. And the deal we gave Carl Granderson a couple of years ago and ended up being brilliant because we all saw that there is like another level to him. Like, we saw flashes and we saw that there's another level to him. I think Bijon is at his ceiling. He could go somewhere and like he might just be awesome. Like, whatever. Like, change of scene does a lot of things for people. But like, he's probably just at his ceiling, and he does some things well, but he doesn't do the things I want him to do well. Like, and so like, for example, like if you're going to be the big tight end, like, I need you to be able to make contested catches. Like, there are other things he does well, like his straight line, like that big over the field crosser, like catch. Yeah, he's okay after the catch and stuff, but like, you know, like for a tight end, like he doesn't do like the things he's bad at, he's like not really like not redeemable at. So I think that's where
scheme him like, open, you can't get open. I think that's part of the big
stuff. And so and then like he can't get separation, and then he doesn't win on contested catches. Because it'd be one thing like if I could just like, okay, he's even with somebody and I can have him high point it. But I think that's where it is, like all personal like annoyances aside, there's just nothing left for like I don't watch Bijon and I'm like, man, I can see it. Like Carl Granderson, even early in his career, when he was doing nothing else and out there just on vibes, he had that spin move where you're like, dude, like there it is. Like that is the thing, you know? So that's where it is to me, where it's like not so much that I think he's necessarily a bad player. It's just more like I don't want to put any more years into him. And I just kind of want to move on. I've seen what I need to see. And like I said, that doesn't preclude him from going to Denver and being okay, because I do think he's a solid player. I think he is an NFL player, which is really good from what he was before.
If we're just grading him as a player, I would put him as an exist guy, but we're grading him for the Saints. So get them out of my face.
Out of my face.
I think for Foster, so here's just my thoughts on Foster. If I'm grading his season this year in a vacuum, I think he was a contributor. I think he was probably the third best player on offense end to end this year. I'm going to put him as exists for me only because of the injury.
Sure. I think that's fine.
I think going into only having a year left on his deal, no, he's a get the fuck out of my face guy for something else he did off the field, but Um, Purely as a football player, to me, he's an exist guy in large part just because I kind of don't expect him to see the field until like early into next year, like
Sure.
in the season. And
Yeah.
so, like I think that's kind of where he belongs.
Yeah, I think injury aside, like, yeah, he had a solid year. You saw him make some tough catches. If I'm pretending in a world where he's healthy, I actually don't mind if he was tight end one. I know it sounds blasphemous, but like, walk with me here. Like, yes, do I want Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, whatever, insert your best tight end ever here? Do I want one of those? Yes, those are a little hard to get. You and I have had like back and forths on like getting those guys. But if I'm not going to have that,
A good draft for him this year, by the way.
yeah, if I'm not going to have that with the trickle down effect, then I almost want like 3 Foster Moreaus that I can just kind of cycle in and out. Almost kind of like how like Dallas did it this year. They lost Dalton Schultz, but then they had like Schoonmaker. They had another tight end that I'm forgetting the name, and then they had like a third tight end, but they all had similar skill sets. So
Or
that's
even
where
Kansas
it's like,
City this year. Like they got Gray.
with like they had
Kelsey
Noah
isn't
Gray.
Kelsey anymore, or at least he wasn't in the regular season. Gray, like, yeah, it's by committee. No, I fully agree with that.
That's cut, and the difference between him and Juwan, they might be like similar. You can't do a committee with 3 Juwans because Juwan doesn't block well enough. Like you can't use Juwan in the run game, or get open, and that's where like
Foster does all 3 of those at an above at replacement level, and occasionally will be above replacement. No, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think the only
Jake Ferguson was the Cowboys guy. So it was Jake Ferguson, Schoonmaker, and Spanford, and they kind of cycled all 3 of those out. So like I'm fine with Moreau being tight end 1 next year if he's like tight end 1. It could be like him, Holker, and insert late draft pick here or insert free agent here.
I'm okay with him being tight end 1 under, and this would be in general for any team around the league. The caveat with a player like Foster being tight end 1, and tight end's kind of a unique position because it's the very nature of the position is to be versatile. Like even with the flex tight ends, especially with modern football, like it's still a very versatile position. The best ones, like a Gronk or guys like that, Laporte even, like they're all versatile players. You have to get, and we're about to talk about this group, it is imperative you have a reliable chain mover at the wide receiver position. You need an X, and specifically you need a guy that is a go-to player on third down. If you don't have a tight end that can be that player, and Foster is not that guy. He's not the big body box him out, catch contested balls guy. He's not the chain mover. He's the do it all and do most things well, but does nothing great enough to be a center point on a game plan. You have to fill that spot at the receiver position. If you don't fill it at the tight end. And again, like this is actually a draft that has both tight ends that could potentially fill that star or at least star adjacent role, as well as some guys who look like they may be chain movers. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility that one or the other of those scenarios happen, provided he's able to get on the field. I don't have an issue with it either way. Yeah. So that said, let's jump into our last offensive group here. Well, actually, really quick, let's hit
the grades and then just have a conversation.
I'm going to call Groupie a contributor.
And Hayball probably the same thing.
Hayball, I'm going to say developmental for now.
Sure.
And only just because like he had a solid year. I'm not willing to call him a contributor because, like, again, to me, that's kind of like at or above replacement level. But he also wasn't like he's beyond exist. Like the guy we had last year was get out of my face, the Australian dude, whatever. Yeah. But I need to see more development from him to really kind of like give him like stamp him, like, re-sign him, bring him on for more time. Sure. But I don't think neither of these guys I think is controversial or bears like too much additional discussion at this time.
Yeah.
So let's jump into receivers. What do you feel about Kevin Austin?
Do we want to maybe just do quick grades and then talk about it holistically? I'm fine either way. So just
let's do that. So let's just kind of knock through the grades really quick. Where do you have Kevin Austin?
Developmental. I think I actually saw some good stuff from him. I mean, I liked it. I mean, like he was just nothing spectacular, but I saw enough to where I'd have him compete.
I agree. I had him as developmental. I was calling it out quite a lot. I think I was even calling it out in like preseason. Like he was making, the kind of that chain mover role. Like he
Yeah,
showed
just
some
kind of
ability there.
in the right place.
Wide receiver 4, not wide receiver 1. Which with all the injuries, he was basically wide receiver 1.
Yeah,
Has to be developmental just because
developmental.
play time.
Yeah, but we saw some stuff, and we'll probably talk about him in the greater discussion. Olave, good player.
We're
some
not
injuries,
idiots, so we're going to put him as a
injuries, but we'll talk about it.
This podcast is a low lead paint podcast, so we don't get involved in that. Pettis to me exists.
Yeah, he made some good plays, some good punt return stuff. Like Shaheed, good player.
I think Shaheed's a good player. I think he was going to have a really good year.
Yeah.
The only thing that makes me go maybe contributor, and we'll go into this when we dig down a little bit, is just the health. Tipton, I don't even want to call him developmental because he didn't show enough to say, well, let's develop him.
Yeah, I think he just exists. Like he's fast, but I didn't see him catch one deep ball. So like
Scantling is contributor to me.
Yeah. Nice
as a
little
wide
revelation.
3 or 4. Good size, good frame, caught the ball pretty well, definitely made some big plays. Not a wide receiver 1 at all, but certainly above kind of that like Traquan Smith threshold as far as like being a valuable contributor that can actually do the main thing you're paid for.
Sure.
Personally, Cedric is a get the fuck out of my face guy.
I don't want to see it anymore. Like I'm good on it. He good guy personally, I'm sure, but like I'm done with it. Like,
nothing against him, but it's just like you're 29, you basically contributed nothing. Like he's not paid a ton.
Yeah.
Let him go. Like put him in camp. Someone should be, if you do the draft and free agency well, someone should be beating him out. It should be him and Bob Means fighting for that final roster spot, and the 23-year-old who's shown more ability should win that spot. That's really just where I am with him. Like, he's not a get out of the league guy. He's just a get out of my face guy.
Yeah, like you would want him as like wide receiver 6, like just if like, something like that. But yeah, wide receivers is interesting, man, because I think it's actually like kind of low key the most interesting position going into the offseason. Like I had this take in our Discord where to me, wide receiver is actually probably the biggest need on the whole team. And a lot of that is tied to health. So I think like Olave and Shaheed, when healthy, great players. I don't know if like that's your like I'd want that as 1-2, and like that's where like I don't know, but like you look at it, like Olave he had concussion issues this year. I think he's had 5 head injuries over the course of his career. Like so he had one at Ohio State that wasn't like reported, and then a couple in his first season. And then Shaheed had the injuries this year, which normally like all right, like he played in most games in the years past. So like you want to say like, okay, it's just like 1 year, but his first 2 years, his snap percentage was like under 35%.
Yeah.
He was just kind of spot player. This is the first year he got this volume where he's playing 80 to 85, 90% of snaps. And he's a speed guy. And the things I don't like when you're a speed guy, groin, hamstring. Those are the injuries he's had. Those soft tissue things, unfortunately for wide receivers, soft tissue stuff for speed guys, and concussions. Those are 2 things that just keep coming. Those are like that just keep coming.
They're hard to prevent. Once they happen,
hard to prevent,
more likely to happen again.
Yeah, and I mean, like, so that's where
you
like
sound like a guy who knows a duck.
I just like
for those who know,
Yeah, I just can't go into this offseason penciling these guys in to play the whole year. I just can't. Like, I think they would, but like. Yeah, like Olave, and then Olave, like his thing with his chemistry with Derek Carr is kind of weird where like I'm not in the building, so I'm not going to play the conjecture game that they hate each other or whatever. Like
I agree with that, but also see my Derek Carr grade.
Yeah, so but the thing is like, with him and Olave, like sometimes like I was looking at this, sometimes players and quarterbacks sometimes don't mix because everybody's like, oh, he was good with Dalton and all these people. But like you look at like the history of the NFL, like prime Ocho Cinco didn't do great with Tom Brady for some reason. Marquez Valdez-Scantling found a home here, despite the fact he played with Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes and didn't catch
Well, he
there.
had a lot of success with Mahomes. It's just that
I was
Chiefs
in
have
Kansas
three
City.
guys that fill that role now.
I was in Kansas City when that was happening, and it was like he was fine. Like, he caught it when he was open. And so then, like, even with Breeze, like, Breeze made Travaris Cadet work and made every pass catching running back work, but then for some reason he couldn't get it with CJ Spiller. We don't know.
CJ Spiller was washed. Like, he just physically had nothing.
Maybe, but I mean, like, I still think
he watched because that knee injury he had in Buffalo.
Yeah.
And he went from like a 4-3 guy to like a 4-6 guy.
Yeah, but even so, like, and then even like you look at Snead, like Snead 1 year was like his security blanket, and then he had that DUI. Like, so you just don't know sometimes what goes into it. Agree. So like, and even like just looking at it, like, you don't know. It looks like Derek Carr is probably more comfortable with like these kind of straight line guys, which is weird because like his best season.
No, he is.
His best season in 2016, his two main guys were Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree, who were kind of similar profiles to Olave. So I don't really know, but maybe at this point in his career, Derek Carr is just not a timing route guy, which is what Olave kind of wins on. He never really
has been. He's always been he's always been a dump off and bombs guy. Like his whole career. I think that is part of it. I think that's part of why him and Shaheed have better chemistry. Chemistry. I think some of that is also, like, again, like, not to bring up the guy's name again over and over, but like it is relevant to this discussion. I think the Saints did some really nice, interesting stuff in the running game this year. I thought the pass offense, even if you factor in the injuries, the passing offense at times was remedial as hell. Again, even if you factor in Derek Carr and the fact that I think they have to give him a pop-up playbook for him to be able to read it. Olave is a 4-3 guy.
Yeah.
Olave is that bomb player. And his first couple years here was that guy. Even last year got used for that because Pete's more of a vertical passing game guy. Clint didn't use Olave for that. He really used him as a clear out guy a lot. And like, you look at his reception perception stuff and some of his separation statistics, and it's like, oh, well, when he was on the field, he was still really, really good. And it's like, and he would be, but the way he's getting open and the things that he does spectacular on those routes and in those concepts, you need a quarterback who anticipates to be able to take advantage of that. And that's just simply not Derek Carr. If he can anticipate, he could also read a room, and then he'd be less unlikable. So we just know he can't do that. It's not in his skill set. Whereas Shaheed, while Olave could also be the just beat the guy deep guy, he wasn't used in that role. So I do think that's part of it. But to the larger, more macro level of what you're talking about, I fully agree. Like, to me, if we want to fix this offense, like, one, you go with the young guy, and that's already been covered. And again, we're not going to beat that horse to death, at least not today. But you fix left guard. Again, doesn't mean you don't need an all-pro. You'd love one, but like, you get a workable player at left guard so that your O-line is relatively reliable. You get an explosive running back somewhere in this draft that is absolutely loaded with them. And then you need either a tight end or a wide receiver. So either a flex tight end or an X wide receiver who can be that reliable safety blanket type player. And again, not to the quality of the player, but stylistically, they actually need a Mike Thomas. They need someone who has the larger body type, specifically who is your chain mover, who keeps the offense on schedule, when there's pressure, you can throw it to the guy and they can go make a play. They can catch contested passes. That specific skill set is missing from this passing game. And that specific skill set, so many of the other players we have are dice roll guys.
Sure.
Shaheed can only has to win 2 routes a game to be a player of the week. Like the NFC offensive player of the week, because he's got 3 catches for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. But you need enough snaps for him to win those 2 deep passes. And that only happens if you're able to keep the offense on time, on schedule, partially because, the more repetitions you have, the more opportunities you have, the more likely you are to have a particular outcome. Just stats. but
Sure.
also because the more you're able to move the chains and keep things on, the more you can scheme guys open with counters, with other plays, with things off of that. So to me,
It-
whether it's tight end or wide receiver, that role is the number one need for this offense for next year. Like
yeah,
even
for
outside of the
me,
health
like
part, which is totally there.
yeah, for me, I think like yeah, I agree that it could be wide receiver or tight end. For me, I think I'd want it to be receiver. Mainly like the other thing that's I think missing, but like you said it, like the chain moving thing, but more than that, like I like you don't associate this with wide receivers, but like we do not have a physical wide receiving core. Like we don't have a physical presence that kind of like wears
You want
on the
like an Anquan
defense.
Bolden.
Anquan Bolden, T. Higgins, like kind of those
Yeah.
guys. Because the main thing, Olave is like almost similar to Kamara in the sense that like Olave can run all these routes. Like he can run 9, he can run the digs, he can run the comebacks, he can run everything. He's probably one of the better route runners in the league. And he has wide receiver 1 skills. But between his frame and now the concussion history, I don't want him running middle of the field routes anymore. Like I want him more running these routes in space, or I want, even though Olave can do all this stuff, I want a little bit
Corner,
with it.
curl, dig, 9. Like
Yeah, like
we want him out there.
yeah, so in the same way, like Kamara can run in between the tackles, I don't really want him to be running in between the tackles anymore. And
Yeah, at
that's
least
kind of
not
how I
consistent.
feel about Olave. Like he doesn't have the frame to do the Mike Thomas stuff. Like he can run slants, but I don't need him getting hit this many times over the course of the game. And
Right.
with that
Or if he's running a slant, you want him on a slant where he's schemed open, where he comes
sure,
3
like off a rub
underneath, and
route
now
or
we've got
something.
daylight in front of him.
And then
Not,
the big thing with the having a physical presence, and for me, like I'm pretty flexible on whether the physical presence a big guy, small guy, whatever, but like especially if it's a big guy, the room for error in the offense kind of increases. Right now, everything kind of has to go right for Olave to get a catch for Shaheed, but you need that guy. Like I think the Block Party podcast just did the one on the McMillan.
McMillan.
Yeah, and so
T-Mac.
like I mean, yeah, he probably doesn't have like quote unquote juice that much, but like but like that kind of big body, like I don't have to be open, like somebody like T. Higgins or whatever.
I actually agree. I agree on that type. I actually disagree with Adam and Ryan on T-Mac. He's actually a gimme guy for me at 9. And a lot of it has to do with the synergy as far as the skill sets.
Sure.
Exceptional contested catch player, has the frame you're looking for. Actually, really good yak guy. People think yak is just speed, but it's really spatial awareness and balance more than it is speed.
Yeah.
Like Jerry Rice was one of the greatest yak players ever. He's basically the reason they track the stat. Jerry Rice ran a 4.5.
Yeah.
Like if you juke a guy in the open field and you get on the other side of him where he now said flip his hips and run, that means go, stop, restart, run. Like it doesn't matter if he's 0.2 of a second faster than you. They're not catching up.
Yeah.
Like, it's a 100-yard sprint. It's not a 500-yard sprint. And that's really where you see McMillan be more of that kind of guy. Also, like, he's taller. Both of the quarterbacks who could start next year, please let it just be one of them. When they miss, they tend to miss high, so that higher frame does help you. But to me, 100% him. There's a kid out of Iowa State. There's a kid, I think, out of Arizona State, if I'm remembering right. There's a couple others. I have a list. I'm going through all the position groups. I'm saving wide receiver and running back as a treat for myself for the end because I have to watch some of this other stuff I don't love as much, including Milrose tape.
Yeah.
I was wrong.
Yeah. I think overall, like if I was to summarize like how they should go for the, like, I won't say names of who to target. They need to go and treat it like Olave and Shaheed are only playing half the games. So like, it's not even so much you need a bunch of, you don't need like T. Higgins plus first round pick plus what, but you need a lot of guys. Like to me, you need a lot of guys. So like, yes, go get McMillan, but also get, I don't know, Mike Williams in free agency. Go get another, like MVS is great. I think MVS is great.
Bring in one vet, draft one. I think you keep both of these guys, or at least one, like definitely.
Yeah, I think Yeah, like
But if
in
you
a
keep
perfect
them,
world, you get the vets, and in the perfect
yeah,
world, you get the vets, and Bub Means beats one of them out for wide receiver 4, right?
yeah,
And like MVS is perfect. That's probably your Shaheed insurance. Like, but MVS as a wide receiver 4 is a great spot to be in,
yeah.
So I think that's just where like they really need to attack it with just like numbers, and it can't just be like when they needed a receiver the Olave year. They're like, all right, we drafted Olave, we're done. Like, which, like you need
And
more.
then we traded Philly Jalen Carter because Mickey's an idiot
Hey,
for a project
man.
O lineman. And again, I don't hate Penning, but let's
Hey,
see
man.
how many teams in the league would trade Trevor Penning for Jalen Carter.
For Jalen Carter. But
One,
that's,
Mickey
yeah.
Loomis.
But
But
that's
also,
kind of
how
where
many
I'm
teams in the
at with
league would
this.
have given Dennis Allen a head coaching job? One, because
Hey.
everyone knew
Yeah.
everything that happened in Oakland,
Yeah. Happy
and they knew
podcast.
he
Happy
was not a viable
podcast.
candidate.
Happy podcast. Keep the
Happy
intrusive
podcast, happy
thoughts out.
podcast, happy podcast.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with receiver, where I do think it's probably the biggest need.
Yeah,
Like if you do nothing with receiver, like I don't feel comfortable going in with
yeah,
this set of characters as your
yeah. I think
core.
as if you look purely at skill sets, I think it's probably the group with the least holes in the offense. But
Yeah.
if you're factoring in health, which we absolutely should be,
Have to.
if you're factoring health and the other components, then I agree with you. I think it is it's a very very needed group. And what's funny is so many people are going to probably watch this. Well, not so many people watch this. 10 people watch this, but uh, some people will watch this, but other people will have similar conversations and are going to talk about it's not a great wide receiver class this year like it has been in previous years. And I agree with that as far as like I don't think there's a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase in this year's draft. I also don't think Mike was a Mike like Mike wasn't a Jamar Jefferson or like Mike isn't Mike without Drew. Like those two made each other, but like Mike also made Mike. Like Mike had that
Sure.
second competitor to him. Let's not like I'm not discounting Mike at all, but my greater point there is players who are sure cut number one receiver, Calvin Johnson archetype, like that's the dude. That doesn't
There are not
mean
a
you
lot of
can't
those.
get.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly my point.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean just because you don't have a ton of those guys in the draft that you won't be able to find highly productive players, provided that you have an offense that gives them opportunities to do what they do well consistently. And I think the best example of this is Puka Nacua was a fifth round pick. And it's not just, oh, McVay's, brilliant, which he is, or Stafford's a pretty damn good quarterback, which he is. It's no, they had a vision for him. We've even seen the clips of it get released. He knew exactly what he was getting and exactly how he's going to put that player in positions to succeed. And so to me, part of why this exercise, and again, really, Mickey, you should start looking at the roster, dude. It's only like you're paid for it. To me, again, agreeing with you that it's the most important position, so much of this comes down to roles and archetype and not getting obsessed with the fantasy football mentality of wide receiver
Yeah.
one, wide receiver two, and more of looking at an NFL offense and the idea of you need to be able to, assuming the kickoff goes, you need to go somewhere between 95 and 75 yards down the field to score a touchdown.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of different ways to do that. The more options you have, the harder it is to defend. And the more things that you have that you can rely on, the easier it is to make the less reliable things effective. Going all the way back to the beginning when we were talking about the offensive line. When you have Patrick and Ruiz and McCoy is out, it's an impossible task. But if just one of those guys is there, or just one of those players is out, you can work around it because you have the supporting cast around it to allow you to coach around it, game plan around it, etc. The wide receiver group is the same way, and the injuries are the same way. Like Shaheed and Chris has a wider skill set than Shaheed, but they also have the same skill set. Shaheed and MBS have the same skill set.
Mm-hmm.
Bub Means maybe has that, chain mover skill set, but he probably doesn't have that higher peak. But you add another guy that has that same skill set, and because of that duplication, your ability to, provided we get a confident passing game, your ability to move the ball opens up.
And that's where
That's
like
my over
having
analytical brain going into that.
yeah, and that's where having the big body receiver. It doesn't even have to be a wide receiver one receiver type. If you get one, cool. And even like Justin Jefferson wasn't stamped as like that dude in the draft. He went in the late 20s. But like even if you just get one of those guys, like it kind of allows everything to maybe fall into a little bit better place where Olave, like, because the thing is, like, the great offenses, like, they have guys that can do everything, but they don't need to do everything. Like, you watch the Rams, they're structured in a way to where, like, Puka and Cup can just do the routes that they like to do, that they're
They're
really
not a
good
great
at.
offense, but yes, I agree.
Yeah, and I
The
mean, like,
greatest offense of all time was the 2011 Saints.
yeah,
You had one player who had a diverse skill set in Jimmy Graham.
right,
Jimmy was dominant everywhere. Short game,
yeah,
long game, mid game, middle of the field, didn't matter. Jimmy could kill you
yeah,
everywhere. Everyone else was just a master of their craft.
yeah, exactly.
Different
And I mean,
crafts.
like, I would say, Colston could do stuff,
I
but
mean, but
like,
even Colston couldn't beat you deep.
yeah,
Like
no,
Colston
that's
was a
fair. Yeah,
possession receiver. He was a top tier elite possession receiver. But Colston
yeah,
isn't a 1,000-yard receiver or a top number one option or anything like that in any
yeah,
offense other than what Drew Brees and Sean Payton ran.
yeah.
But he played
And
here.
and I think that is ultimately the key. Like you're like, how do you find these late round guys or
Yeah.
whatever, and how do they find Puka? The way they find them is like they get him, they find Puka. Like
Vision.
should he have gone in round one? I don't know, but like the reason he went there is because like there are deficiencies in this game. He's not as
Yeah.
big, he's not whatever, but like the Rams took him and said, do what you're good at. That's how you
Yeah.
get seventh rounders to work. You don't get
100%.
Bub Means to come in and then say, hey, Bub Means, we need you to run every route and be wide receiver one. No, like you need Bub Means to do what he's good at. And so that's what eventually like they need to do with like multiple things. And that's where, like I said, I hope it's not just like get a wide receiver at 9 and then we just don't look at wide receiver for the rest of it. Like we need multiple, like I said, I want to get Mike Williams and I want somebody to beat Mike Williams off the roster. Like that would be amazing, So it's just like
Absolutely.
yeah, so I think that's just like what it needs. You just need to stock the cupboard. And I think just with wide receiver, it's I know like you can like kind of reassign those roles to tight end, but I think it needs to come from the wide receiver just because of where you can line them up and how multiple wide receivers can be. Where like tight ends that are multiple are a little bit harder to come by, though this draft is good for it, So.
And I mean, the nice thing is it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. I mean, you could go T-Mac at 9. You could go, Helm or Taylor or Fannin Jr. or pick your guy in the second round at tight end, or you could go running back like if Blue or Henderson are there. And then in round 3, you can take a guard and a tight end or running back, whichever one you didn't get in round 3. This is actually what I would do if I was the Saints.
Yeah.
Unless, like, if a guy like Princely drops to the second or something like that, like you also need a pass rusher. You get like a value spot there, or you trade down from 9 to like 16. You get Nolan. Like there's some other circumstances where I do other things, but for me personally, I'm trying to get a running back and a tight end in those first 4 picks for sure, and BPA for all 4 spots. But the other 2, if the best player on my board is a safety, great. Our safeties suck. Take a safety. If it's a corner, if it's Johnson at 9, okay, that's fine. Take him at 9. But then round 2 and both third round picks impact offensive players. Like, and go where the draft is deepest, where you can get guys that fill skill sets that you don't have. And as we just covered throughout this whole offense, which by the way, half this freaking thing is red, and those are guys who aren't even NFL goddamn players. And the other half of the rest are pink, which is not even an above replacement. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blue players, and then like 2, 3 contributors. Like this is not a good offense. But you add a few impact players, and the way that this stuff actually works in real life, not fantasy football, folks, you add a few good players, and the grades of some of these other guys go up because they're suddenly asked to do what they're good at.
Yeah.
MVS or Shaheed only asked to go, hey, go running that way fast and catch it when I throw it to you. Really good player. asked to be a number one wide receiver where the opposition's entire game plan is make sure you don't do that one thing, not nearly as good of a player. And that's actually the problem is because of those missing skill sets, you have people being asked to do things that they shouldn't
Way
be
too
asked
many
to
things.
do. It's like asking me to dunk. I'm fat and 5'10". This is a very poor decision on your part.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And so that's where, like, for me, draft wise, I haven't dug into it, but I want every. If I could have my way, I want every pick going to offensive skill players.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want any offensive linemen, whatever. I don't care about eating my vegetables. Like, I need wide receivers. I need running backs. I need all
guard,
those.
like the second, third round pick or something like that, I'm fine with it. If they take
I don't even want
at
that.
9, I may burn down Arrowhead.
Yeah. I don't even want that, man. Like, just I want as many skill. I just want as many skill players as possible. Like, we're not going to be a good team next year, but I would prefer us being a team that's losing like 31-45 rather than 12-16 or something. That's just me, though. You know.
No, I mean the league in general agrees with you, but also like I agree as well. And I'll do defense next week, but I think you have more contributing players on defense. I think you actually have fewer good players, like objectively good players. I think you have more contributors. Both sides need stars. I think it's a lot harder to build a great defense in today's NFL than it is to build a good offense.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where things stand. So, hope everybody enjoyed this. I had a ton of fun. I'm glad you were able to come on. I'm going to stop
100%.
sharing now. So, I will add. Are you still on Twitter? I'm not calling next.
I am. I'm not really active, so you don't.
All right, cool.
I don't need to be promoted there.
Awesome.
So.
just wasn't sure. So hope everybody enjoyed that. Like I said, I had a ton of fun. If you guys made it all the way through, do the whole YouTube thing, like, comment, subscribe, and if you made it through and for some reason you didn't enjoy it, feel free to hate comment so other people see the video so they can suffer the way you have. But again, thank you for coming on, buddy. And
yeah, absolutely, man.
Go ahead.